We are back with this week's Sister Scoop and Marvel news. So let's get into it. There's something very exciting I want to talk about, which is Young Avengers seem like they're finally going to get their time to shine.
Yeah, it sounds like there's going to be a TV show currently potentially under the name of Champions that looks like it's going to start production in January 2026, which seems like a long way away. But then you think about the fact that, January 2025 is in a few
Yeah.
days. So in just about a year, we might be kicking off production of a Young Avengers TV show.
Yeah, and that could be really exciting. I mean, personally, I wish it was a movie. I think I've made
Me
that
too.
pretty clear that I wish that was the direction we were going in general with them. I have been seeing though that they seem to be saying, hey, like they're the next group that we want to have for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So if that's true, like I guess that's half of what I've asked for. I can't completely complain because I said, ideally they are it, right? We right now I would say we have whatever Avengers are gonna form and we have the Thunderbolts, but like it'd be really cool to be able to have the Young Avengers be the next title instead of being Avengers and Young Avengers. So if that still holds true, but it just kind of means they need a show to get them there, that's fine. I think I also have a little bit of the concern because the shows have not always hit it out of the park. And I've granted neither of the movies, so I'm not going to sit here and say like they've all gone, 10 for 10, but it would be kind of nice to have a movie, especially since a lot of these characters I feel like deserve to be on the big screen because they've all been in shows already.
Yeah, I definitely was surprised that they were going to go the show route if that is the truth. I think to your point, you see the term Avengers, whether there's young before it or not, and you assume kind of higher level movie type
Yeah.
stuff, not to, say anything bad about the shows, but the bigger stories tend to be told on the films. And so I am a little surprised that that's the route they're going. But you know what? If they're able to maybe tell a longer story and kind of flesh that out and set that foundation to your point a little bit better, they feel in the show format. With Agatha, they were able to kind of figure out a little bit of the pacing of the shows a little bit. So I'm hopeful that the shows moving forward will kind of build upon that success. And by the time we get a Young Avengers show in maybe late 2026, they've kind of figured out how to properly tell those stories in that format. So, jury's still out, but at least we're getting some positive, like maybe concrete, even if it's just rumors at this stage, concrete news about the Young Avengers more than just, the Easter eggs that we've been getting.
Yeah, I agree. I think then, too, moving into our next topic, which is different but also very exciting for us. Sadie Sink is being looked at possibly to play Jean Grey. Now, I think this threw a lot of people for a loop, not because we don't think Sadie Sink would be great. Obviously, I'm a Stranger Things fan. I love her. I think she's awesome. But I think because everybody was like, oh, they're going young at this point. Like, we're not going 30, 35-year-old Jean, which has been something we've talked a lot about. Like, are they going to go when they're a lot more established, which is what we kind of saw in the OGs? Or are we going to go, more what we saw in Days of Future Past and the start of it? And it seems like we're doing the second one, but like very, very early on, if that's what they're doing. And they're casting somebody who's pretty much my age to play Jean Grey.
Yeah, it was super interesting. I was reading an article when I was preparing for this episode, and they were talking about this could hint that they're going to go the OG X-Men, which is, folks like Angel and Beast. And it's actually a smaller team, obviously Cyclops and Jean as two of the first students, but a much smaller OG team, which could actually be really cool because you're getting, to your point, the origin of the X-Men like they did in First Class, but a different group. And so that could be really cool. It would allow the MCU to tell their own story while still getting that origin story of the X-Men. So I actually am really behind it. I think it could be cool to spend the next, 7 to 10 years watching them build out their ranks and pull in the mutants that we know and love that obviously become part of the X-Men as they go forward, but starting with this kind of core group and then building from there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. Sorry, by the way, guys, if you see my dog in the back. He's making
we love a little Gambit cameo.
Making a bit of an appearance. He was licking my feet during part of that, so I was trying not to have a reaction. I don't disagree, though. I really do think that it would be really cool to do that. We haven't seen it done before. And honestly, X-Men 97 had a huge emphasis on the original team. And not even just X-Men 97, the OG show itself emphasized that original team. So I think it'd be really cool cool to start there. And we talked a lot about
Yeah.
X-Men and X-Men 97 being that blueprint for maybe what they do in actual live action, because it's worked, right? Like, obviously it works a little differently in animation. It's a lot easier to do some of these storylines in animation than the 3, 4, 5 years it could take to put it all together actually on the big screen. But regardless, it'd be a really cool starting point. I know I said to Taylor when we were talking about topics, I was like, this girl could be set for like 15 years at least if they really want to play this out, because she could play Jean Grey through the Phoenix Saga and beyond if that's what they choose to do. So I do like this idea. I like it being Sadie Sink because, like I said, she's a great actress. I've watched her since she was probably the age of 11 to now the age of 22, 23. And obviously she's got the very fiery red hair that our Jean Grey is known to have. So I would really like it. I think she's a great pick if it's true.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well, and then to our last one. Now this one, so blinds aside, we'll pull everything aside. Taylor and I are currently in the same house. If you can't tell, we're making the best of our situation of not being in our usual spots. But we were together choosing these topics, and we were together when some of this news was breaking. And this includes what I'm about to share, which is the Sony CEO has been speaking out about the Spider-Man universe and what they've been doing. And the irony of all of it is that it seems that he's kind of blaming critics and the fact that critics are doing their job, which is watching the movie and giving their opinions on why the Sony Spider-Man universe, that's your Madam Web, your Venoms, and your Craven, can't forget Morbius, why it seems to be doing so poorly. And they just think, and I believe one of his comments were along the lines of, at this point, anything we put out is essentially just going to get torn apart. And I'm like, yes, but there's more to it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It seems like he doesn't believe that Sony is putting out poor movies, that they're just getting completely ripped apart by critics, and therefore the audience is agreeing with them. T, what are your thoughts on this?
I have a few. And, the first is it's kind of insulting as a member of the audience to be told that, we're basically sheep who follow what all of the critics say. To your point, the critics criticize or give their opinion because that is their job. They are journalists in the entertainment industry. Their job is to see films and provide analysis and their opinions. They get paid to do that. This is not some crazy attack on Sony Pictures, dude. This is their job. But then the second part of that, I kind of started off with, audiences make their own decisions. Do you listen to critics? Sure. If critics say that it's a bad movie, am I going to spend the money? Probably not. But you're assuming that everybody listens to that and everybody feels that way. You're also negating the fact that Spider-Man has an incredible fan base. He's one of the most popular comic book characters in the world. And even though he's not in these films, these are characters that live within his realm. So you have a built-in fan base that you've already alienated through bad films. They are in fact bad films. It's not just the critic scores that are bad. It's the tomato meters. It's the discourse on the internet. Yes, people are making fun of it, but they're making fun of it because it's bad. They're making fun of Madam Web because the story makes no sense. Not just because whatever, it is memeable. It totally is, and it's hilarious, but it's also just a poorly written film. So you just gotta take accountability. You greenlit something, it didn't come out well. Don't blame the critics and the audiences for doing that, my guy. That's just not the way to do it.
Well, and I think obviously there were some really interesting and funny reactions coming out of this on Twitter and Threads and all these places that this news is being broken on. But I think what's so interesting is, it isn't about the fact, putting aside whether the movie is good or not, because I think something I could sit there and say was I actually enjoyed watching Venom 3 and I actually enjoyed watching Craven. Can I sit there and say it was a good movie? I mean, as a whole, it's not bad. I'm going to say that. As a whole, I don't think it is a bad movie. But when these are based off of comic book heroes or villains specifically, and they're caricatures essentially of who they really are, plus you're making these movies and you're kind of missing the big chess piece, right? Where's Spider-Man? I don't mean to be that person, but that's the fact. You're making all these movies off of sometimes C-level characters or D-level, if you really want to talk about Madam Web, like nobody in their right mind half the time knows who that even is. If you even somewhat dabble, like it takes a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So to say that, oh, well, the critics and to say this and that, whatever, that's just not, that's not true. You're just not making movies people want to watch. Like, I don't mean to be rude, but that's the fact.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this a lot. Like, you're making films to retain rights to characters that you bought off Marvel when they were weak. They are no longer,
Yeah.
struggling as a company, clearly. They're doing great, but they are doing so much better now, and you have lost all of your leverage. So you just make these movies so that you can retain the rights. And nobody wants you to have these rights because you're not even doing like good stuff with it. So, like, it's not boding well for them. It does not make them look good. The CEO is clearly tone deaf. Like, I just don't know what else to say. It's just these movies, you can't defend them in this way. It's just not gonna work. There's no way that as a culture we've universally decided the Sony Spider-Man universe is our most hated franchise of all time and we're just going to tank all of them. No, like, I think that the fans go in for the most part with a heavy dose of skepticism after, 6 failed movies,
Yeah.
or, the first Venom's pretty good, but 6 moderate to pretty bad movies. And we're going to go in with a healthy dose of skepticism, but I think there is some level, at least from our perspective, of optimism. We like to give them at least a fair shake. And sometimes they're decent films if you remove them from the context in which they're supposed to exist. And sometimes they're just unintelligible and bad. And like, that's just the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree. So, interesting remarks. We'll see if he's got more to say. But in the meantime, that's been this week's Sister Scoop with our Marvel news. We'll be back next week with 3 more topics. Lots of things coming out. So, hopefully, we'll get some interesting news bits in the meantime. And make sure you guys are also keeping up with the podcast as we're currently on all our socials covering What If Season 3. And then we'll be having our end of year recap and all that good stuff. So, we'll see you guys next week for more Marvel news. See ya.